My husband ran off with his secretary, and I took everything in the divorce and found true love, but not in the way anyone would expect, because the love I found was for myself, for my own power, and for the exquisite art of calculated revenge. The discovery came on a Tuesday morning that started like any other, coffee brewing in the kitchen while I scrolled through my phone, still in my silk pajamas that David had bought me for our anniversary just 3 months prior. The irony of that memory would later taste like copper pennies in my mouth, but in that moment, I was still blissfully unaware that my entire world was built on lies. His phone was buzzing on the counter. David never left his phone behind. Never. The man slept with that device clutched in his palm like a rosary. But there it was, vibrating against the granite countertop while the shower ran upstairs, and something cold and serpentine slithered through my chest. The message preview glowed on the lock screen. Can't wait to feel you inside me again tonight. Same hotel? My vision tunneled. The coffee mug slipped from my fingers, shattering against the Italian marble floor we'd chosen together during our kitchen renovation last year. The sound echoed through our picture-perfect suburban home like a gunshot, and I felt something fundamental crack inside my chest. Not my heart, that would come later, but something deeper, my sense of reality. The sender's name blazed across the screen. Jessica M. Jessica. His secretary, the 26-year-old blonde with the perpetual smile and the way of tilting her head when she listened, like a curious puppy. I'd met her at the company Christmas party, had even complimented her dress, a red number that hugged her curves in ways my 42-year-old body had forgotten how to achieve. She'd blushed and called me beautiful, told David how lucky he was. Lucky? My hands began to shake, a fine tremor that started in my fingertips and radiated outward until my whole body was vibrating at a frequency that felt dangerous. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, a thunderous percussion that drowned out the shower running upstairs, where my husband of 15 years was washing off the scent of another woman. How long? The question slammed into my consciousness like a physical blow. How long had they been doing this? How many nights had he come home to me, kissed my forehead, asked about my day, all while her perfume lingered in his hair? How many times had I made him dinner, rubbed his shoulders, listened to him complain about work stress that was probably just the excitement of sneaking around behind my back? I thought about Jessica's desk, positioned right outside David's office door. The perfect setup. How many times had I called the office and heard her voice, sweet as honey, telling me David was in a meeting? How many of those meetings had been her, bent over his desk while I sat at home planning our anniversary dinner? The betrayal was a living thing inside me now, clawing at my ribs, making my breath come in short, sharp gasps. I gripped the counter, my knuckles white against the dark stone, and felt the first real emotion crash over me. Not sadness, not hurt, but pure, crystalline rage. 15 years. I had given this man 15 years of my life. I'd put my own career on hold to support his advancement, had played the perfect corporate wife at countless company functions, had smiled and made small talk with his colleagues while he built his reputation and his salary. I'd decorated our home, managed our social calendar, kept myself in shape, dressed well, been everything a successful man was supposed to want. And he'd thrown it all away for a secretary who probably didn't even know how to balance a checkbook. The shower stopped upstairs, and I heard the familiar sounds of David's morning routine, the hairdryer, the electric toothbrush, the cabinet doors opening and closing. Soon he'd be downstairs, tie perfectly knotted, cologne subtly applied, ready to kiss my cheek and head off to his office where Jessica would be waiting. I forced myself to breathe, to think. The phone was still in my hand, evidence of his betrayal literally at my fingertips. But I needed more than one text message. I needed everything. My fingers moved without conscious thought, muscle memory guiding me through the process of forwarding the message to my own phone. Then I deleted it from his, covered my tracks, and placed the device exactly where he'd left it. By the time his footsteps sounded on the stairs, I was already planning. "Morning, gorgeous." His voice was the same as always, warm and familiar, and the casual endearment made my skin crawl. He kissed my temple, his lips dry against my skin, and I had to bite my tongue to keep from screaming. "You forgot your phone," I managed, my voice steady despite the hurricane raging inside my chest. "Thanks, babe. I don't know what I'd do without you." He grabbed the device, already scrolling through messages, and I watched his thumb pause, just for a fraction of a second, before continuing. Was he looking for Jessica's text? Had he noticed it was gone? Coffee? I asked, though my own mug lay in pieces on the floor. I'll grab some at the office. Jessica always makes it perfectly. He was already heading for the door, briefcase in hand, mind clearly elsewhere. On her. Love you. The words hung in the air like smoke after he left, and I stood in our kitchen, my kitchen, that I'd designed and decorated and made into a home, and felt something inside me crystallize into diamond-hard resolve. He loved me? He loved the convenience of me. He loved coming home to a clean house and a hot meal. He loved having a wife who looked good at company parties and never questioned his late nights. He loved the facade of our perfect marriage while he played out his midlife crisis with a girl young enough to be his daughter. But I was done being convenient. I spent the morning in what I can only describe as a fugue state, moving through my regular routine while my mind worked furiously in the background. I swept up the broken coffee mug, how symbolic I thought bitterly, and made myself breakfast I couldn't taste. I watered my plants, did a load of laundry, responded to emails about the charity gala I was organizing for next month. All the while, Jessica's message burned in my phone like a brand. Can't wait to feel you inside me again tonight. Same hotel? The casualness of it was what really got to me. Not the desperation of a stolen moment, but the comfort of routine. They had a system, a regular schedule. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a single lapse in judgment. This was an affair, complete with established patterns and familiar meeting places. By noon, I'd made my decision. I was going to destroy them both, methodically and completely, and I was going to enjoy every second of it. But first, I needed information. I needed evidence. I needed to know exactly how deep this betrayal went before I decided how deep my revenge would cut. I started with his credit card statements, logging into our joint account with fingers that had stopped shaking and now felt steady as steel. The charges told a story that made my stomach clench with fresh waves of nausea. Hotels, expensive restaurants I'd never been to, jewelry purchases that had never made it home to me, spa treatments. Was he sending her to get massages? Waxes? The thought of my husband paying for another woman's Brazilian made me want to burn the whole world down. The pattern emerged quickly once I knew what to look for. Every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 6 months, charges at the same boutique hotel downtown. Always the same amount, always paid for with our joint account. My money, funding his affair. 6 months. While I'd been planning our anniversary trip to Europe, he'd been planning his twice-weekly escapes with his secretary. While I'd been picking out lingerie to surprise him, he'd been buying jewelry for her. While I'd been trusting him completely, he'd been making a fool of me with methodical precision. I printed everything. Bank statements, credit card bills, hotel receipts I pulled from his email account using the password he'd shared with me years ago. The same password he apparently wasn't smart enough to change. The pile of evidence grew on my desk like kindling for a bonfire, and I felt a cold satisfaction begin to build in my chest. This wasn't just about catching them anymore. This was about justice. I called my lawyer that afternoon, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Chen, who'd handled our house purchase and will preparation with ruthless efficiency. If anyone could help me navigate the coming storm, it would be her. I need to discuss divorce proceedings, I told her, the words feeling strange and powerful on my tongue. And I need to know how to protect my assets. Patricia's voice sharpened with interest. What's the situation? Adultery. I have evidence. Lots of it. The satisfaction in my voice surprised even me. I want to take him for everything he's worth. How long have you been married? 15 years. I put my career on hold to support his advancement. He's a senior partner at his firm now, and I've been the perfect corporate wife the entire time. I could hear the bitterness creeping into my voice and didn't bother to hide it. Now I want my compensation. Bring me everything you have. Every document, every receipt, every piece of evidence. We'll take care of this properly. Properly. The word tasted like victory. That evening, David came home with flowers, roses, my favorite, and guilt was written all over his face like a neon sign. Had Jessica mentioned something? Had he realized his phone had been moved? Or was this just his way of assuaging whatever microscopic conscience he had left? These are beautiful, I said, accepting the bouquet with a smile that felt like glass cutting my cheeks. What's the occasion? Do I need an occasion to buy flowers for my beautiful wife? He was trying for charming, but I could see the sweat beading at his hairline. Guilty conscience or afternoon exertion with his secretary? Both, probably. I arranged the roses in a crystal vase, a wedding gift from his mother, and watched him fidget in the kitchen, checking his phone every few seconds. Waiting for Jessica to text him, probably. Planning their next rendezvous while standing 3 feet away from the woman he'd promised to love and honor. How was work? I asked, the question loaded with new meaning. Busy. You know how it is. He loosened his tie, the same nervous gesture he'd made throughout our marriage when he was hiding something. How had I never noticed before? How many lies had I swallowed over the years, thinking they were just stress or work pressure? Jessica seems nice, I said casually, watching his face carefully. I should have her over for dinner sometime. Get to know her better. The panic that flashed across his features was so brief I almost missed it, but I was looking for it now, cataloging every micro-expression for future reference. I don't think that's necessary, he said quickly. She's very busy. Work keeps her pretty occupied. I'll bet it does, I thought, but smiled sweetly instead. Maybe just coffee then. I like to know the people you work with. He mumbled something non-committal and escaped to his home office, probably to delete messages and cover his tracks. Too late for that, darling. I already had everything I needed. Over the next week, I became a woman I didn't recognize, methodical, calculating, patient in a way that felt almost predatory. I followed him twice, just to confirm what I already knew. The boutique hotel downtown, Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, like clockwork. I watched him walk in with Jessica, her hand on his arm, both of them laughing like teenagers skipping school. The sight should have broken my heart, but instead it fed the cold fire burning in my chest. They looked so pleased with themselves, so convinced they were being clever. David, my husband of 15 years, opening car doors for his secretary like he was auditioning for prom king. Jessica, tottering on heels too high for walking, clinging to his arm like he was her sugar daddy, which I realized with bitter clarity he essentially was. Sugar daddy funded by his wife's sacrifice and support. I photographed everything. Them entering the hotel, leaving together, his hand on her lower back in a gesture of casual ownership that made my teeth clench. I documented their affair with the same meticulous attention to detail that I'd once applied to planning our anniversary parties. The irony wasn't lost on me. All those years of being the perfect wife, the organized partner who handled every detail of our life together, had trained me perfectly for this moment. I knew how to plan, how to execute, how to manage complex logistics while maintaining a calm exterior. David had created his own enemy. Patricia reviewed my evidence with the satisfaction of a prosecutor preparing for trial. Bank statements, photographs, credit card receipts, hotel records I'd obtained through a private investigator she'd recommended, a quiet man who specialized in infidelity cases and delivered results with professional discretion. This is very thorough, she said, spreading the documents across her conference table like tarot cards predicting David's future. Adultery, waste of marital assets, breach of fiduciary duty. We can work with this. What can I expect? Given the length of your marriage, your sacrifice of career advancement to support his success, and his clear dissipation of marital assets on this affair, Patricia's smile was sharp as a blade. You can expect to do very well. Spousal support, division of assets heavily in your favor, and depending on how vindictive you want to get, we might be able to go after damages. Vindictive. The word sent a thrill through me that I didn't bother to examine too closely. How vindictive can we get? In this state, adultery affects everything. Asset division, spousal support calculations, even his retirement accounts. If we can prove he spent significant marital funds on this affair, which we can, the court will want to compensate you for that waste. I thought about the hotel receipts, the jewelry purchases, the expensive dinners I'd never tasted, the spa treatments and lingerie and whatever other ways he'd spent our money on his secretary. My money, earned by 15 years of unpaid labor as his personal assistant, social coordinator, and emotional support system. Let's be very vindictive, I said. Patricia's laugh was like music. The next phase required patience, and I discovered I had reserves of it I'd never tapped before. I had to continue playing the perfect wife while my lawyer prepared our case, had to smile and cook dinner and ask about his day while building the framework for his destruction. It was actually easier than I'd expected. Years of suppressing my own wants and needs in service of his career had taught me to compartmentalize beautifully. The difference now was that instead of compartmentalizing my disappointment and frustration, I was compartmentalizing my rage and anticipation. David, meanwhile, grew increasingly sloppy. The guilt was eating at him, or maybe the excitement of the affair was making him careless, but either way, he was making mistakes. Lipstick on his collar, actually lipstick like some cliché from a soap opera. Phone calls he took in another room, always with the same hushed, intimate tone. Late nights that became later, excuses that became more elaborate. Did he think I was stupid? Had he always thought so little of my intelligence? The realization that my husband had never respected me enough to even be good at lying to me added another layer to my growing fury. "I might be late tonight," he told me on a Thursday morning, straightening his tie in our bedroom mirror while I pretended to read in bed. "Big case coming up, you know how it is." "Of course," I murmured, not looking up from my book. "I'll keep dinner warm." He kissed my forehead, the same perfunctory gesture he'd made every morning for years, and I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. In 2 hours, he'd be at that hotel with Jessica, probably telling her how understanding I was, how I never questioned his schedule or demanded his attention. What a perfect wife I was. How convenient. After he left, I allowed myself 5 minutes to scream into a pillow, to let some of the pressure building in my chest escape before it cracked my ribs. Then I got up, made myself breakfast, and called Patricia to confirm our timeline. "We're filing next Friday," she told me. "Process service will happen at his office, in front of his colleagues." "You wanted maximum impact, correct?" "Maximum impact. Public humiliation for the man who'd been publicly humiliating me for months without my knowledge. It felt like poetry." "Perfect," I said. "What about freezing assets?" "Already prepared. We'll file for emergency relief the same day, citing waste of marital property and flight risk. His accounts will be frozen by close of business." I thought about David trying to take Jessica out for their regular expensive dinner, only to have his credit card declined. The image made me smile for the first time in weeks. "There's one more thing," I said. "I want his firm to know exactly why I'm divorcing him. Make sure it's all in the public record." "Adultery proceedings are public by nature," Patricia confirmed. "His firm will definitely know, along with anyone else who cares to look." David worked at a conservative firm, the kind of place where reputation mattered almost as much as billable hours. An adultery scandal, especially with his own secretary, wouldn't just be embarrassing, it could be career-ending. Partners had been forced out for less. The thought should have made me feel guilty. 15 years ago, it would have. The old me would have worried about his career, his reputation, his feelings. But the old me had trusted him, had believed his lies, had played the role of perfect wife while he made a fool of me with a girl barely out of college. The new me wanted to watch him burn. Friday morning arrived gray and cold, fitting weather for the end of a marriage. David was unusually affectionate at breakfast, perhaps sensing something in the air, or maybe just feeling guilty about his afternoon plans with Jessica. He complimented my hair, asked if I wanted to go out for dinner that weekend, even suggested we plan another vacation. Too little, too late, I thought, but smiled and played along. "That sounds wonderful," I lied, watching him butter his toast with hands that would be shaking by afternoon. He left for work in a good mood, humming in the shower, taking extra care with his appearance. Date day with the secretary, after all. Had to look his best for the woman who was about to help destroy his life. I waited until 10 o'clock, giving him time to settle into his office routine, then called Patricia. "It's time," I said. "Process server is on his way. Asset freeze paperwork is already filed. Are you ready for this?" Was I ready? I'd been ready since the moment I saw that text message on his phone. I'd been ready since I realized how long he'd been lying to me, how much of our money he'd spent on his affair, how little respect he'd had for our marriage or for me. I'm ready. The waiting was the hardest part. I tried to stay busy, organizing closets and cleaning bathrooms, but my mind kept drifting to David's office, imagining the moment when the process server walked through the door. Would Jessica be there? Would she realize what was happening? Would David try to lie his way out of it, or would he finally have the grace to look ashamed? My phone rang at 2:17 p.m. "It's done," Patricia said, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. "He's been served. Asset freeze is in effect. How do you feel?" How did I feel? Vindicated. Powerful. Alive in a way I hadn't been in years. The woman who'd spent 15 years making herself small, accommodating, convenient, was gone. In her place was someone harder, sharper, infinitely more dangerous. "I feel like myself," I said, and realized it was true. David came home early, his face the color of old snow, tie askew, looking like he'd aged 10 years in 6 hours. The divorce papers were clutched in his hand, wrinkled from his grip, and his eyes were wild with panic and disbelief. "We need to talk," he said, and his voice cracked like a teenager's. "Do we?" I was arranging the roses he'd brought me last week, the ones that were just starting to wilt. How appropriate. I think the papers say everything that needs to be said. This is insane, Rachel. You can't just... He stopped, probably realizing that I very much could, and had. We can work this out. It doesn't have to be like this. I turned to face him then, and whatever he saw in my expression made him take a step back. Work it out? My voice was calm, conversational, and somehow that made it more terrifying than if I'd been screaming. Like we worked out your relationship with Jessica? Like we worked out your twice-weekly hotel visits? Like we worked out all those charges to our joint account for jewelry I never received? He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. A fish gasping on dry land. I know about everything, David. The hotel, the restaurants, the gifts, the spa treatments, 6 months of evidence, documented and photographed and ready for court. I moved closer and he actually flinched. Did you really think I was that stupid? That oblivious? That I'd never noticed my own husband was fucking his secretary? It wasn't... He was stammering now, the smooth-talking lawyer reduced to a guilty child. It didn't mean anything. It meant everything. I corrected. It meant you thought so little of me, of our marriage, that you'd risk it all for a 26-year-old who probably can't spell fiduciary duty. It meant you'd steal from our joint accounts to fund your midlife crisis. It meant 15 years of my life meant nothing to you. He sank into one of our kitchen chairs, head in his hands, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then I remembered Jessica's text message, remembered the casual way she'd asked about their next rendezvous, remembered the lipstick on his collar, and the lies he'd told with such practiced ease. The assets are frozen, he said finally, voice muffled by his palms. I can't access anything. How am I supposed to... Figure it out, I interrupted. Like I'm going to have to figure out how to rebuild my life at 42 after wasting 15 years on you. He looked up then, and I saw something that might have been the beginning of fight in his eyes. Good. I wanted him to fight. I wanted him to struggle and scheme and exhaust himself against the legal walls Patricia and I had built around him. This is vindictive, he said. You're trying to destroy me. I'm trying to get what I'm owed, I corrected. 15 years of unpaid labor as your personal assistant, social coordinator, and emotional support system. 15 years of putting my career on hold so you could build yours. 15 years of playing the perfect corporate wife while you built your reputation and your salary. I walked to the window, looking out at the garden I'd planted and maintained, the life I'd built around his needs and schedule. Do you know what I gave up for you? I asked without turning around. I had a job offer in New York when we got married. Marketing director at a major firm, 6-figure salary, career trajectory that would have set me up for life. But you didn't want to move, didn't want to disrupt your precious career path. I could hear his breathing behind me, quick and shallow. I gave that up. I gave up promotions and opportunities and networking events because you needed me to be available, to host your clients, to attend your company functions. I made myself into the perfect accessory for your success. I turned to face him again, and the expression on my face made him shrink back in his chair. And you threw it all away for a secretary who probably thinks a 401k is a marathon distance. I'm sorry, he whispered, and tears were actually running down his cheeks. I'm so sorry, Rachel. I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know why You were thinking you could have it all, I said. The perfect wife at home and the exciting young mistress on the side. You were thinking I was too stupid or too complacent to notice. You were thinking I'd never have the courage to fight back. I moved closer, close enough to see the panic in his eyes, close enough to smell the fear sweat that had replaced his expensive cologne. You were wrong. The divorce proceedings moved forward with the inexorable momentum of a landslide. Patricia was a master at her craft, methodically dismantling David's attempts at damage control while building an unassailable case for maximum asset division in my favor. David hired his own lawyer, of course, an expensive defense attorney who specialized in protecting wealthy men from the consequences of their poor choices. But even he couldn't argue with the evidence we'd assembled, the clear pattern of adultery and waste of marital assets that Patricia presented with surgical precision. The firm where David worked was less understanding than he'd hoped. Word of the adultery scandal spread through their conservative offices like wildfire, and suddenly David found himself excluded from client meetings, passed over for high-profile cases, generally treated like the liability he'd become. Jessica, meanwhile, had been quietly terminated for unprofessional conduct, corporate speak for fucking her boss and getting caught. I felt no sympathy for either of them. They'd made their choices with full knowledge that there could be consequences. Now they were living with them. The temporary support order came through in our favor, requiring David to maintain me in the style I'd become accustomed to while the divorce was pending. The irony was delicious. He had to pay me to live in the house we'd shared while he moved into a small apartment across town, his assets frozen and his reputation in shambles. I used the time well. I enrolled in classes to update my marketing skills, hired a career counselor to help me plan my professional comeback, and joined a gym where I worked out my residual anger on weight machines and punching bags. The woman who emerged from this process was harder, leaner, more focused than the one who'd discovered that text message 6 months earlier. I was becoming someone I actually liked. The final divorce hearing was scheduled for a cold Tuesday in March, exactly 10 months after I'd found out about Jessica. David looked haggard as he sat across the courtroom from me, his expensive suit hanging loose on his diminished frame, his once confident demeanor replaced by the hunched posture of a man who'd lost everything. Patricia had warned me that he might try one last appeal to my emotions, one final attempt to avoid the financial devastation that awaited him. She was right. "Your Honor," his lawyer began, "my client acknowledges his mistakes and deeply regrets the pain he's caused. However, the proposed settlement is punitive rather than equitable. Mrs. Henderson is seeking to destroy my client financially in a way that serves no legitimate purpose." I watched David's face as his lawyer spoke, looking for any sign of genuine remorse or understanding of what he'd done to me, to us, to the life we'd built together. I saw only self-pity and resentment, the expression of a man who still believed he was the victim in this situation. Any lingering doubt I might have had about the course I'd chosen evaporated in that moment. Judge Morrison was a woman in her 60s who'd clearly seen every variation of marital misconduct during her decades on the bench. She reviewed our evidence with the weary thoroughness of someone who'd heard every excuse and justification men could devise for betraying their wives. "Mr. Henderson," she said finally, "you engaged in a systematic pattern of adultery while using marital assets to fund that relationship. You spent significant amounts of joint funds on hotels, gifts, and entertainment for your paramour, while your wife sacrificed her own career to support your professional advancement." David's lawyer started to object, but Judge Morrison held up a hand. Furthermore, the evidence shows this wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment, but a calculated deception carried out over many months. "Mrs. Henderson has demonstrated that she reorganized her entire life around supporting your career, foregoing her own professional opportunities in reliance on the partnership you promised in marriage." She looked directly at David and her expression was arctic. "You violated that partnership in the most fundamental way possible, and you used your wife's contributions to fund that violation. The proposed settlement is not punitive, it's compensation for what you've taken from her." The gavel came down like thunder, and just like that, 15 years of marriage was officially over. I walked out of that courthouse with nearly everything. The house, the majority of our savings and investments, David's retirement accounts, and alimony that would support me while I rebuilt my career. He'd managed to keep his car and enough money to rent an apartment, but his comfortable lifestyle was over. More importantly, his reputation was destroyed. Word of the adultery scandal had spread beyond his firm into the broader legal community. Job opportunities had dried up, client referrals had stopped coming, and his career trajectory had gone from ascending to crater-bound in less than a year. I felt no guilt about any of it. Every dollar I'd been awarded, every professional consequence he'd suffered, was the natural result of choices he'd made with full knowledge of the risks involved. I hadn't destroyed his life. I'd simply refused to continue subsidizing the destruction of my own. But the real revenge, the truly satisfying part, came 6 months later. I was having coffee with Patricia, celebrating the successful launch of my consulting business, when she mentioned seeing David at a legal conference. He'd been trying to network, attempting to rebuild his professional relationships, but was having limited success. "He looked desperate," she said with clinical detachment. "And he wasn't alone." I raised an eyebrow, curious despite myself. Jessica was with him. Apparently they're engaged. The laughter that bubbled up from my chest was genuine and uncontainable. Jessica, the secretary who'd helped destroy my marriage for the thrill of stolen hotel afternoons and expensive gifts, was now stuck with the consequences of her choices. Instead of a successful lawyer showering her with luxury, she'd inherited a man whose career was in ruins, whose finances were decimated, whose reputation was toxic. She'd wanted to steal my husband? She was welcome to him. She'd gotten exactly what she'd fought for, a lying, cheating man who'd proven he couldn't be trusted with the most basic promises and commitments. "I almost feel sorry for her," Patricia said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "I don't," I replied, and realized I meant it. She knew he was married. She knew what they were doing was wrong. She made her choice, and now she gets to live with it. Forever. I agreed, raising my coffee cup in a mock toast, to getting exactly what you deserve. The truly beautiful thing about it was that David and Jessica were trapped together now. She couldn't leave him. Who else would want a woman known for breaking up marriages? And he couldn't afford to leave her. His reputation was so damaged that she was probably the only woman who'd have him. They'd built their relationship on deception and betrayal, and now they got to spend the rest of their lives wondering if the other might do the same thing to them. Every late night at work, every friendly conversation with a colleague, every moment of distance would be colored by the knowledge of what they were both capable of. They'd created their own prison and locked themselves inside. Meanwhile, my life was blooming in ways I'd never expected. My consulting business was thriving. It turned out that 15 years of managing David's career and our social life had given me skills that other people were willing to pay handsomely for. I was helping other women restart their careers after divorce, organizing corporate events, managing complex projects that challenged me in ways I'd forgotten I missed. I'd also started dating, something that felt foreign and terrifying at first, but gradually became enjoyable. It was revelation to spend time with men who asked about my day and actually listened to the answer, who saw me as an equal partner rather than a convenient accessory. 6 months into my new life, I met Jonathan at a professional networking event. He was a successful architect, recently divorced himself, who understood the particular pain of rebuilding your identity after a long marriage. He was kind, intelligent, genuinely interested in my thoughts and opinions, and completely uninterested in trying to make me into a more convenient version of myself. Our first real conversation lasted 3 hours, ranging from career ambitions to travel dreams to books we'd loved and movies that had disappointed us. When he walked me to my car, I realized I'd spent an entire evening being completely myself, not performing the role of perfect wife or accommodating partner, just being Rachel, with all my opinions and ambitions and sharp edges intact. "I'd like to see you again," he said as I unlocked my car door. "I'd like that too," I replied, and was surprised by how much I meant it. 6 months later, Jonathan proposed. Not with grand gestures or public displays, but with a quiet conversation about building a life together as equal partners, about supporting each other's dreams while maintaining our individual identities. He'd seen me at my strongest and my most vulnerable, had witnessed my rebuilding process and respected the woman who'd emerged from it. "I love who you are," he said, "not who you think I want you to be." It was the difference between night and day, between performance and authenticity, between settling and thriving. We married on a Saturday in October, exactly 2 years after my divorce was finalized. It was a small ceremony, just close friends and family, focused more on the promises we were making than on impressing anyone else. Patricia was my maid of honor, having become one of my closest friends through the crucible of the divorce proceedings. As I stood at the altar looking into Jonathan's eyes, I thought about the woman I'd been 3 years earlier, accommodating, diminished, so focused on being what David wanted that I'd forgotten who I actually was. That woman felt like a stranger now, someone I'd known once but outgrown completely. The revenge I'd planned so carefully had succeeded beyond my wildest dreams, but the real victory wasn't David's downfall or Jessica's trap, it was my own resurrection. I'd taken the worst thing that had ever happened to me and used it as fuel to build something better than I'd ever imagined possible. David and Jessica were welcome to each other and to the life they'd chosen. I had found something infinitely more valuable. I'd found myself. The final irony came at the reception, when my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I opened it. "I hope you're happy now. You destroyed everything." It was from David, of course. Even on my wedding day, he couldn't resist making himself the victim of his own choices. I showed the message to Jonathan, who read it with the same calm assessment he brought to every challenge. "Are you going to respond?" he asked. I looked around the reception, at my friends and family celebrating with genuine joy, at Patricia raising a toast to new beginnings, at Jonathan's hand in mine representing a future built on honesty and mutual respect. "No," I said, deleting the message. "I have better things to do." And I did. I had a business to run, a marriage to build, a life to live on my own terms. I had found true love, not just with Jonathan, but with the woman I'd become through the process of fighting for what I deserved. David could keep his regrets and his blame and his bitter messages. I had taken everything that mattered in the divorce, but more importantly, I had discovered everything that mattered in myself. My husband had run off with his secretary, and I had taken everything in the divorce and found true love. Just not in the way anyone would have expected, including me. The love I'd found was the most important kind of all, the love that comes from knowing your own worth and refusing to accept anything less than you deserve. Everything else was just details.